Hey everyone, in the last video you saw how a complex trait can evolve. Here you'll see how antibiotic resistance can evolve startlingly quickly in bacteria. Now as always, as you go through the video, remember to fill out the learning guide, and at the end you should be able to answer two questions. And our first question is, how does antibiotic resistance evolve? And our second question is, what is the role of chance in evolution? Although the evolution of the eye took a long time, organisms with short generation times, or those that reproduce quickly, like bacteria, can evolve new traits in just a few days if environmental pressure is strong enough. First, view this video all the way through that describes how antibiotic resistance evolved. Then we'll come back and discuss certain parts of the video.
So what we ended up building was basically a petri dish, except that it's 2 feet by 4 feet. And the way we set it up is that there are 9 bands, and at the base of each of these bands, we put a normal petri dish thick agar with different amounts of antibiotic. On the outside, there's no antibiotic. Just in from that, there's barely more than the E. coli can survive. Inside of that, there's 10 times as much, 100 times, and then finally the middle band has 1,000 times as much antibiotic. And then across the top of it, pour some thin agar that bacteria can move around in. The background is black because there's ink in it, and the bacteria appear as white. First, you see they spread in the area where there's no antibiotic, up until the point they can no longer survive. Then a mutant appears on the right. It's resistant to the antibiotic, it spreads, until it starts to compete with other mutants around it. When these mutants hit the next boundary, they too have to pause and develop new mutations to make it into 10 times as much antibiotic. And then you see the different mutants repeat this at 100. And after about 11 days, they finally make it into 1,000 times as much antibiotic as the wild type can survive. And so we can see by this process of accumulating successive mutations that bacteria, which are normally sensitive to an antibiotic, can evolve resistance to extremely high concentrations in a short period of time.
Okay, so let's take a closer look at what's happening at this point in the video. Remember that this is a 4-foot long petri plate, so there are billions and billions of bacteria that are growing here. Now notice that there are only about a dozen or so new mutants that have mutations that allow them to grow into the area with antibiotic. That's how rare mutations are. Among these billions of cells that are on this plate, only a few have mutations that gave them resistance to this antibiotic. And if we determined the DNA sequence of all of these mutants, we would see that some of them have mutations at different genes. This tells us that there are multiple ways a new trait like antibiotic resistance can develop. Mutation of different genes can potentially lead to antibiotic resistance. Okay, let's play the video forward again.
When these mutants hit the next boundary, they too have to pause and develop new mutations to make it into 10 times as much antibiotic.
And this is a really important point the narrator brings up. The cells have to pause at the next highest antibiotic concentration because they have to wait for new mutations to occur. Mutation creates genetic variability first, and then the environment, in this case the presence of an antibiotic, selects for those mutants, which are then able to move into the area with more antibiotic. Now, why did the cells have to keep waiting for new mutations to occur every time they encounter a higher concentration of antibiotic? In other words, why weren't those initial mutations that allowed the bacteria to colonize low concentrations also allow them to colonize really high concentrations of antibiotic? Take a moment, pause the video, and think about this question. Okay, so this is because natural selection doesn't wait for the best possible allele to be created by mutation. It selects for the first beneficial allele that, in this case, is much more likely to increase antibiotic resistance by just a little bit. So why is it that these initial mutations didn't give the bacteria the ability to colonize the very highest concentrations of antibiotic? Probably it's that there isn't any one mutation that can do that. Many different mutations were required to allow the cells to grow at very high concentrations of antibiotic. And if we go to the end of the video, we can see that many mutations were needed to colonize the highest concentration of antibiotic. Each dot represents a new mutation that was acquired along the way. And just like we saw with the evolution of the eye, multiple rounds of mutation and selection are required to obtain resistance to high concentrations of antibiotic. And just like the dinosaurs, we can see that many lines of these bacteria died out, or in other words, were not able to reach the higher concentrations of antibiotic because they failed to acquire additional mutations or additional genetic diversity that allowed them to survive that environmental change. The change in this case is an increase in antibiotic concentration. And this should lead us to ask, I think, why did some cells gain additional antibiotic resistance mutations and others did not? And now for a second time, pause the video and see if you can guess. Okay, and the answer, as you might have remembered from previous videos, is chance. Mutation is random, and these cells just happen to get an additional antibiotic resistance allele through random mutation. These just happened to not get an additional antibiotic resistance allele through mutation. And recall that we also saw this with our two hypothetical populations that were subjected to malaria. One just happened to get a malaria resistance allele through mutation, and the other didn't. So once again, we see here that chance has a pretty large role to play in evolution. As you might imagine, this is relevant medically, as the overuse of antibiotics has selected for human pathogens like MRSA, or multi-drug resistant Staphylococcus aureus, that are resistant to multiple antibiotics. So I'm going to show you a picture of a MRSA infection, and if you're squeamish or you don't want to see it, you can turn away from the video for a few seconds. Okay, here's the picture. Okay, the picture's gone. Now, MRSA and other antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria pose a danger not only to hospitals, but also to child care centers, retirement homes, and any other facilities that have people that are frequently treated with antibiotics. Okay, so you should now be able to explain how antibiotic resistance evolves and explain the role of chance in the evolution of traits. As always, feel free to watch the video again if you'd like to review. Now, in the next video, you'll see one of my favorite scientists explain how the remarkable diversity of life on Earth has emerged. See you all later.